So what if I see a cloud and it's shaped like a triangle? What is reality? And there's various senses of it. What is reality about, how I think about things? The interesting thing, I mean, I really think if you answer this question, you will find out how you think about things more than you find out how things really are. I mean, that's a separate question, right? How you think about things is one thing, and how well that corresponds to the data you have is another. And how well that corresponds to what's really going on in this universe around you is even another question. On the other hand, of course, I think that I've explained to myself to a large degree what reality is, what we mean when we say something is reality, and really a lot of the issues about it. Now, I'm not saying I know every detail, especially since I'm a skeptic and I don't think every detail is even knowable. But I do, as we all do, I get sense perceptions, and there's certain consistencies, and we can draw conclusions about models that fit that. But I'm really jumping ahead of myself because I think, firstly, it's a linguistic and psychological question, and it's a language question. What is reality? Okay, there's. I remember thinking about reality at that point, and it was a very confusing question to me because I knew reality was the real world, the things were happening in the real world, sort of the undeniable facts of the matter. But I also knew that people didn't know the undeniable facts of the matter, and when they were talking about reality, it was more like their idea of what those facts meant. Reality didn't seem to consist of just the facts. It was interpretations on top of what people get as facts. Their idea of what those facts meant. And this is really unavoidable because some of the things that we think of as facts are actually interpretations. If I have an object and it looks 3D, I mean, I actually get two-dimensional images from two eyes, and I get sounds and all the other things, and I combine them together and paint them on this, basically computer type representation in our mind of the object, and I think of the fact as, look, there's a three-dimensional thing there, my hand. In a reality, what I'm getting is all this information, none of which is a three-dimensional. It's two-dimensional processed together to make three. We know to do that, okay? But it's done, and by the time we even get sensations that we think of as fairly raw, fairly direct, like, here's a thing, it's been processed, okay? And that's why the question of what does reality mean is so important. Okay, now, in some sense, we want reality to mean things that are in the real world. And I understand that, and we are gonna that's what the whole purpose of the term is, to help us think more clearly about the distinction between imaginary and real. But one of the problems that you encounter first off is that imaginary things are real, right? If a unicorn, it's an imaginary thing. If there's a picture of a unicorn on a computer, it's real. Somebody painted it with real paint and took a picture of it and put it on the internet or whatever. Then there's pixels that are set to particular colors. That's real. If I'm just closing my eyes and picturing a unicorn, that's also real. There's some biochemical reaction, real reaction, that is responsible for that experience. So everything has a material basis. And so this leads to confusion in the term. And we need to first understand this distinction carefully, that when we're talking about real versus imaginary, we're actually talking about, the so-called imaginary is a subset of the real. Okay? It's not the opposite of the real. It could only be the opposite of the real if metaphysics existed, but there is no metaphysics, so it's a subset of the real. That's an important thing to understand. So the imaginary is a subset of the real, and the distinction is still a strong one because, you know, it, um, it's a representational figment of a mind or a computer, and we do understand enough about representationalism. I think it's you can make it confusing, but it's also a fairly straightforward thing that we say that unicorns are real, but they're imaginary creatures. They're not real creatures. They are physical and material insofar as they're in physical minds and computers. Okay, but then back to the intention also of this is what is should go in the set of reality. What should be put in the set of things that we consider reality? And I think that we acquired over a long period of evolution, the idea that we use our senses and sense correlation. Okay, if you see it with your eyes, then it's probably something real. But then again, that's obviously not a universal rule. And I use this example a lot. If you see a face in the clouds, the cloud is real and the face is imaginary. And we're used to this kind of thing. It happens all the time. And we do double takes and dim lighting, and we know that we have to sense our raw images. But what we do is we use consistency. Okay, you can sort the imaginary from the real by using consistency. And it's both the consistency of what you see, but also that if you see something and it's making a sound, so there's this coincidence in time of two senses. And again, that's a greater consistency. And consistency is really using different senses over different times to triangulate on something, to get another reading that helps confirm it, with the idea that imaginary things don't stand up to this kind of scrutiny. Now, part of the problem is that a lot of illusions do stand up to this kind of scrutiny, especially the kind of illusions that we bring in by using a certain kind of logic. Or, for example, thinking of cause and effect a certain way. If you restrict what you think cause and effect must be, then you can introduce an illusion to all of your thinking about everything that happens. And so that illusion, that error, can be omnipresent. So the biggest errors actually slip by the test for consistency because you are consistently putting the error in every time. So it always seems the way you see it to be. Knowing this is why I'm willing to and entertain and eager to hear arguments about why the will might not exist. And I know that they will come to what is the will. That's not, and it's an object, and it's that object that I consider in reality. But all I really have are the sense inputs that gave me the hint that the object was there. So every time I talk about the object, which is supposedly in reality, I'm talking about the model in my head that I pieced together from whatever my limited senses were. I'm talking about the model in my head. Supposedly in reality, I'm talking about the model in my head. So I came to notice that, yes, when people talk about reality and they say what's really the case, they are always talking about this model in their head, but only sometimes are they talking about what's really going on in the world around them. So what is reality? Primarily, the way most people use it, it is just their own misconceptions and conceptions of the world mixed together. When a scientist or engineer talks about it, they are talking about reproducible material measurements and constants and forces of nature told in terms of mass and distance and time. The models that we all use are part of our imagination. So if I see a cloud and it's shaped like a face, I say that the face was imaginary. But what if I see a cloud and it's shaped like a triangle? The triangle is imaginary as well.